This 28-pound piece of plastic from Nature's Head cost us over $1,000. We bought the toilet when we were planning our first van build, and now we have some regrets. After using it for the first 6 months of traveling in our current van, I want to share 10 truths about the Nature's Head toilet so that you can make an informed decision on whether or not it's actually worth spending your hard-earned money on. I'm also going to give you some tips on how to make the Nature's Head easier to live with if you do actually decide to buy one after watching this video. Now, just a quick disclaimer. This video is talking about toilets, so we're going to be using the words pee and poop a lot. And if you're not comfortable with those words now, you definitely will be by the end of the video. So sit back and enjoy. Before we even bought our first van, the thought of constantly searching for a public toilet or digging a hole in the ground just to squat over, it just sounded horrible, to put it mildly. So from the very get-go, we knew that we wanted a toilet in our van. The question then is, what sort of toilet should we buy? Well, in the RV and camper market, there's essentially 3 toilet options. Now, the first option is a black tank with a porcelain water toilet inside, and that's the most common in North America. You'll even see that on like a truck camper, like a Bigfoot or a Northern Light. The next option is a cassette or chemical toilet. Now, these are the most common in Europe, although they are gaining traction in North America. And the last option is a separating toilet, which is what the Nature's Head is. Now, when you have limited space, limited water, and you're trying to wild camp, a heavy flushing porcelain toilet is frankly unnecessary, and a black tank is really hard to empty outside of a dedicated campsite.
Shitter was full!
A cassette or a chemical toilet, whilst portable and lighter weight, is just a continuous horror show of watching your raw sewage just gurgle down the drain every time you have to empty it. If you don't believe me, just go watch first-time campers trying to dump their toilet and look at their reactions. It'll tell you everything you need to know. We've got 3 dogs, so honestly, I'm pretty desensitized to poop and messes. But just trust me, a cassette toilet is boss level nasty. This really only left one option for us, and that was a separating toilet. When we bought our first van, which was actually all the way back in 2019, there wasn't a huge amount of choice in the separating toilet category. And the Nature's Head, although initially designed for boats and kind of the marine environment, had actually taken the van life community by storm. For a while, it seemed like almost every van lifer on YouTube or on Instagram was recommending the Nature's Head. So, enamored by the idea of composting our poop, which is sort of the big selling feature of the Nature's Head, and not having to deal with raw sewage, we went ahead and bought this Nature's Head right here for our van. Now, the Nature's Head main party trick, or claim to fame, is that they separate the pee from the poop. And this means that they can be emptied separately. And that allows you to use any public toilet to dump out the pee. Another huge benefit of separating the pee and the poop is that you avoid having to use chemicals to reduce the smell, as you typically would with either a black tank or a cassette chemical toilet. Because in those cases, the pee and the poop mixes together and just becomes sewage. To ensure that your camper stays odor-free, the Nature's Head also has a built-in fan and a hose attachment right here, so that you can vent all the smells outside of your van. However, I think what attracted a lot of people to the Nature's Head was the idea that your poop could be composted. And that's because it's designed to be mixed with either coconut coir or peat moss inside the solids compartment. But the question is, does the Nature's Head actually compost? So, for $1,000, you get a toilet that can separate your pee and poop, has a built-in fan, and can compost your poop as well. But when you compare it to a fancy Japanese porcelain toilet that'll wash your bum and dry it afterwards for the same $1,000, then the Nature's Head kind of begins to sound like a bad deal. I get it, that comparison is definitely not apples to apples. So instead, let's go through 10 truths about the Nature's Head that you should definitely know before buying one. According to a lot of YouTube reviews of the Nature's Head, simply putting the poop and coconut coir mixture into a biodegradable bag and then throwing that in a regular bin will allow your waste to keep composting. But is that actually true? Well, there's two big problems with that assumption. The first problem is that in North America, most waste is put into landfills, and these are designed to be anaerobic. That's just a fancy way of saying that there's no air. But if there's no air, there's also no composting. The second problem with that assumption is that in European countries, a lot of them will actually burn their waste for either electricity or heat production. Now, obviously, if your poop is being burned, it's not being composted either. Strictly speaking, you can use the Nature's Head to compost your poop, as long as you are willing to leave it inside the toilet for several months at a time. Now, if you plan on using your camper for longer trips, or especially for full-time traveling, then that's obviously not particularly practical, since the poop compartment is going to fill up way before it's actually had a chance to finish composting. Not to mention you're going to keep adding to it, obviously. So instead, you can use the Nature's Head to start the composting process, but you would still need to empty the poop and coconut coir or peat moss mixture into a whole separate composting bin in order for it to actually finish the composting cycle and probably break down into soil. So, unless you have a garden with a compost bin at home and you're okay carrying around your poop for the duration of your trip, it sounds really funny when you think about it, then just frankly, you're not going to be composting your poop in the Nature's Head toilet. Personally, I don't love the idea of carrying around buckets of poop in my camper, but let me know in the comments if you would carry a bucket of poop around for months just so you can compost it at home. I'm really curious. At the end of the day, composting your poop in the Nature's Head toilet is at best extremely impractical, and honestly, for most travelers, it's just downright impossible. Since we've determined that the Nature's Head toilet doesn't actually compost, you might be thinking that there isn't much point in dealing with all the fuss with the coconut coir or the peat moss. After all, it just makes the whole toilet dirtier, harder to clean, and harder to empty. Now, if you had that thought, go ahead and give yourself a good pat on the back, because you are absolutely right. We never even bothered installing the spindle that's supposed to go right here, and which is designed to help mix together the poop and the coconut coir. By the time we actually got around to using the Nature's Head in a van build, we had discovered the truth about composting in it, and we never even bothered trying to compost the solid waste. Instead, we just put a regular garbage bag in the poop compartment. This makes emptying it a whole lot easier, as you're not dealing with a lot of mess. Instead, you just close up the garbage bag as you normally would when it's full and just throw it in any bin. You know what else is easy? Tapping the like button so that others can learn about pooping in a bag. The sudden realization that your pee jug might be full right as you're in the middle of your morning pee is a horrible feeling. With just my wife and I, we found that we realistically had to empty the pee jug every day or risk it overflowing at the worst time on day 2. If you like to spend your time in a campsite, then that's really not a huge deal. But for us trying to be off-grid, it was a big limitation. And sometimes we had to leave a spot earlier than we wanted to just to go find a public toilet so that we could empty the pee jug. Now, unless you choose to do most of your peeing outside, which, let's face it, if you're surrounded by other campers might get a little bit awkward, then you will find that the pee jug in the Nature's Head gets filled up very, very quickly. Since the pee jug in the Nature's Head toilet fills up quite quickly, you might be wondering where you can empty it. Well, technically, you should be okay to empty your pee bucket in nature, as long as you dilute it, since there are no chemicals or really anything harmful in it, and it's most definitely not sewage since it hasn't been mixed with poop. However, you should always follow the local laws where you're traveling and re-up on them before you head out. With that being said, I definitely do not recommend emptying your pee jug right in front of a park ranger, as they just might not understand the distinction between a separating toilet and a cassette toilet. During our latest trip, we were traveling in Spain and Portugal, both of which have incredible infrastructure for campers. So we were always able to find an official dump site to empty our pee jug. However, since it isn't sewage and there are no chemicals in it, you can also just empty the pee bucket into a normal toilet or even just an outhouse without any issues. A lot of people seem to get very upset at the thought of pooping in a camper. In fact, I recall one YouTuber saying that people who pooped in their camper were quote unquote disgusting. Blows my mind. Anyway, maybe those people just had really bad experiences with either a black tank or a cassette toilet, where everything sloshes together and just creates a horrible nasal bouquet of chemicals and sewage. A camper is a small space, and unless you have an extremely unusual sense of smell, you probably don't want to smell the contents of your toilet all day long. Thankfully, the Nature's Head combination of a closing lid, separation of the pee and the poop, along with a fan that vents outside the van, all of those together do a great job of keeping out any toilet smells from your camper. Now, the most critical piece is obviously the fan and the hose, which, well, the fan is inside here and the hose attaches here. Those will help avoid any smells, so make sure that you install the included hose and vent it outside of your camper. Obviously, if one of you had the misfortune of eating anything off the Taco Bell menu, then you might want to turn your ceiling fans to max air out during the act, so to speak. Cleaning the toilet is a crappy job, but someone has to do it. At first glance, you would think that the Nature's Head would be really easy to clean because it just looks like a solid piece of plastic. But unlike the poems of a lovesick teenager, the Nature's Head has a lot of hidden depths. After using the Nature's Head toilet for a few weeks, we kept getting this just faint smell of pee. And even after thoroughly cleaning the pee jug, the pee bowl, like the toilet bowl on the inside, and the exterior of the toilet with vinegar, we just kept smelling pee. After living with the smell for weeks, we finally discovered that the pee separator is connected to the poop compartment. And because it's quite flat, the pee doesn't always make its way into the pee jug properly. This means that small drops of pee can and will make their way into the hollow area inside of the toilet seat. Now, because of the way the toilet is constructed, there's also no way to actually get an adult hand in there to clean. So if you don't have any children that you can bribe to clean your toilet, then you're just going to have to get creative with a spray bottle and an old toothbrush. Now, I don't know about you, but that's really not my definition of a fun afternoon. Another issue is that somehow toilet paper has a way of getting into the area where the poop hatch slides in. Now, the end result of that is pee-soaked toilet paper in an area that is just so hard to clean. In general, a lot of the cleaning issues with this toilet relate to the hatch that closes off the poop compartment. And although that does help with the smell, the areas where it slides into are just so hard to clean. So, although the Nature's Head generally doesn't smell, the dried pee that ends up in the hard-to-clean compartments will absolutely begin to smell unless you stay on top of it. Unfortunately, these hard-to-reach compartments make the toilet unnecessarily difficult to clean. If you're watching this video, you probably think that you know how to use a toilet, but maybe you don't. Using the Nature's Head requires a little bit of extra thought. Unless you have an incredible aim, which I know most of my fellow men and I think we do, then I would recommend against standing up to pee in the Nature's Head toilet. Because the area for the pee to funnel into is so small, your aim has to be spot on to minimize the risk of pee splashing and going onto the hatch that closes off the poop compartment. And if pee gets onto that hatch, as we've already discussed, then it's into every single nook and cranny. So, if you're a bloke, take a seat or be prepared to clean up a mess. This does lead me into another gripe that I have with the Nature's Head toilet. Although the whole toilet itself is quite wide, the actual toilet bowl is quite small. Now, for adult blokes, this is going to mean a lot of adjusting if you don't want your family jewels resting against the edge of the pee-soaked plastic. Now, before the ladies in the audience think that they're off the hook, there is actually a whole routine for women to follow if they don't want pee to go into the poop compartment, which trust me, you don't. The routine, according to my wife, is as follows. Feel the need to go, powder your nose. Lift the lid, sit down in the toilet. Decide whether you need to pee or poop. If you just need to pee, it's pretty easy. Just sit down and make sure you're sitting as far forward as you can, since the pee funnel is quite small and sits quite forward in the toilet, and then proceed. If, however, your significant other convince you to eat a dodgy burrito, then you're going to want to exercise some caution, because trying to pee and poop at the same time with female anatomy on the nature's head can lead to some unpleasant consequences. Essentially, you have to try to time your pees and poops, making sure that the poop compartment hatch is closed when you're peeing. Then you have to shift back, open the lever to open the poop hatch, and complete your ablutions. So, if you're a woman and you want to use the Nature's Head toilet, just be prepared to shift back and forth to avoid a mess. Before I talk about the next point, let me just stress that you do not want to forget to open the poop hatch. Whether you're a man or a woman, the mess will be equally unpleasant if you forget. Just trust me on that one. With a Nature's Head toilet, or any separating toilet, emptying it is not as luxurious or easy as simply pressing a button and having your digestive efforts whisked away in a gurgle of water. Instead, with a separating toilet, the water is replaced by good old hand labor, and not the kind that makes designer purses. The construction of the Nature's Head toilet essentially consists of two halves. There is a top half and a bottom half that are kept shut with a clasp here on each side. Now, the top half contains the toilet bowl, and the lower half contains the poop compartment along with a cubby for the pee jug. In order to empty the pee jug, you have to lift up the entire top half of the toilet. And that sounds easy on the face of it, but the problem is that in most van installations, you're going to have a bathroom wall sort of right behind it. And that means that you actually have to hold this sort of pretty heavy lid up whilst you're simultaneously trying to empty the pee jug. And you get used to it, but it's really not easy. Now, the same procedure applies for emptying the poop bin, except that's going to be even more difficult because you ideally need to have two hands in order to actually tie up the garbage bag. And so you kind of find yourself in this sort of weird position of sort of using your head to hold up the lid, which is really not ideal when you're dealing with a toilet. So whether you're emptying the pee jug or you're emptying the poop compartment, the top-heavy design of the Nature's Head just makes it really awkward to empty. Now, as you can imagine, both of these scenarios are going to involve you getting very up close and personal with your toilet. If you opted for the compost method of using the Nature's Head, where you have, some sort of composting medium in there, then you're actually going to have to remove the toilet completely from your van in order to actually literally just scrape out and then dump all your coir and poop mixture into a separate bag. Now, neither option is fun, but at least just closing a garbage bag is a lot less messy. Before I talk about the next point, if you guys have found this video helpful so far, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any tips, tricks, and truths to make living in a camper easier. Now, unless someone invents a mobile version of a fancy Japanese toilet with a built-in bidet, then toilet paper is an absolute necessity. If you want to use the Nature's Head toilet as the company intends, then they recommend that you minimize the amount of toilet paper that you put in the poop compartment. And look, that makes total sense from a composting perspective and from a cleaning perspective because the toilet paper will just catch on the spindle, which is just gross. However, the toilet paper still has to go somewhere at the end of the day. So in the quasi-composting scenario, you're going to find yourself needing a whole separate bin where you can keep the used toilet paper. But that still has to be emptied fairly regularly because there's no fan in it. And that means that it's going to start to smell. Now, the solution, in our opinion, is just to give up on composting in the Nature's Head toilet entirely. Instead, just use a regular bag in the poop compartment. That way, you can throw the used toilet paper into the bag that's in the poop compartment. And because that compartment has a fan, it's going to keep the smell to a minimum and save you another cleaning chore. Although I've been fairly critical of the Nature's Head toilet, it does have some redeeming features. Since it was designed for marine environments, the toilet is designed to be waterproof, which sounds a little bit silly considering that this whole thing is just a piece of plastic. But in practice, it means that water is kept out of the poop and the pee compartments. This means you could actually have it permanently mounted in a wet bath, for example. A side benefit of this waterproofing is that it prevents the smells from inside of the toilet escaping, and it just makes the work of the fan a little bit easier. With that being said, after 6 months of using the Nature's Head toilet, we're not really impressed. I suspect that I would be more forgiving of the flaws in the design if it didn't cost over $1,000 to acquire. And that is just a huge sum of money when you compare it to the alternatives. Unfortunately, as with so many things designed for mobile applications, whether we're talking about 12-volt fridges or anything else, companies seem to think that the word mobile, kind of like the word wedding, is just an excuse to overcharge customers. Now, the good news is that in the past few years, a lot of alternatives have come onto the market. In fact, when we built out our Mercedes 711D, our Nature's Head toilet, this very one in fact, was deeply buried in a storage locker in Switzerland whilst we were completing our van build in Sweden. So instead of wasting, and by that I mean investing, another $1,000 on a Nature's Head toilet, we just bought a toilet kit from Kildwick that included the separator, pee jug, and the poop bucket. We then built our own plywood box to accommodate that kit, and then installed a regular toilet seat just to make it more comfortable. This also allowed us to actually build the toilet into an area that would have been really difficult, since we sort of incorporated the plywood box into our wheel well box. Now, apart from not having a fan, which I really would recommend, that system worked really well for our first extended van life trip through Slovenia, Greece, Turkey, and Georgia. If you want to build your own composting toilet, we do have a link in the description for an affordable kit that you can buy on Amazon. For $120 and a sheet of plywood, you can build your own camper toilet. If you want the toilet to vent outside, which I really do recommend, then all you need is a 12-volt computer fan like the one we've linked below, and combine it with some PVC pipe and hose that you can just go buy at your local hardware store. Even after buying the kit, the plywood, the fan, and the plumbing pipe, you will have saved almost $800 when you compare it to the Nature's Head toilet. That's a lot of money. To give your new toilet some extra moisture resistance and make it more personal, I would also recommend painting the plywood box afterwards, ideally with something like a linseed oil paint. If you want to see how we incorporated the Nature's Head toilet into our open concept 144-inch wheelbase Sprinter build, then go check out our van tour video.